The irony of watching my husband sign his own eviction papers wasn't lost on me. David sat across from his lawyer, his Mont Blanc pen hovering over the document, still believing he was securing his latest victory. If only he knew he was signing away the very house he'd tried to steal from me. "Just a standard refinancing agreement," he assured the notary, flashing that charismatic smile that had once made me fall in love with him. The same smile he'd worn when he suggested I quit my job to focus on making our house a home. The smile that had convinced me to let him handle all our finances because he was protecting our future. I maintained my carefully crafted expression of wifely admiration from my seat beside him, the same mask I'd worn for the past year while I meticulously gathered evidence and planned my counterattack. The diamond on my finger felt heavy, a constant reminder of the promises he'd broken and the trust he'd betrayed. Through the law office's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Boston skyline, the same view I'd admired 15 years ago when I'd bought my first property long before I met David. That building had been the foundation of my real estate portfolio, all carefully hidden under layers of LLCs and holding companies. The same portfolio David had spent the last 3 years trying to discover and claim as his own. "Everything looks in order," his lawyer confirmed, passing the papers to me. "Mrs. Reynolds, if you'll just sign here as well." I took the pen, its weight familiar in my hand. After all, I'd signed countless property deals before David, before he convinced me to simplify our lives by putting everything in his name. What he didn't know was that I'd never actually transferred my properties. The documents, he thought, gave him control of my real estate empire were as fake as his devotion to our marriage. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking time until the next phase of my plan would begin. In less than 24 hours, David would discover that his attempt to seize our family home would backfire spectacularly. The house he thought he was claiming through this refinancing was about to become his biggest regret. "Sarah, honey," David's voice carried that subtle condescension he'd developed over the years. "Remember to sign your full legal name." I smiled demurely, playing the role of the dutiful wife one last time. If only he knew that every document he'd filed over the past year, every attempt to transfer property into his name, had been carefully monitored by my team of lawyers. The same team that had helped me structure my business long before I met him. The notary stamped the final page with a satisfying thunk. David reached for the papers, but his lawyer quickly shuffled them into a folder. "I'll file these first thing in the morning," he assured us. What David didn't know was that his lawyer, handpicked by him for his aggressive approach to asset protection, was about to receive some very interesting documents about his client's creative accounting practices. I'd spent months building a case that would not only protect my assets, but expose David's attempts to defraud me. As we left the office, David placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that once made me feel cherished, but now sent chills down my spine. "Let's celebrate," he suggested, already planning how to spend money he thought he'd secured. "That little bistro you love?" "Actually," I replied, maintaining my gentle smile, "I need to finish packing for my sisters tomorrow." The sister he thought was having marital problems, who needed my support. In reality, she was helping me coordinate the final pieces of my counterattack. David kissed my cheek, his lips barely grazing my skin. "You're such a good sister," he said, his voice dripping with false pride. "Take all the time you need." I watched him stride toward his BMW. I thought about the email he'd receive tomorrow from his bank. The one explaining that his accounts needed review due to suspicious activity. By the time he realized what was happening, it would be too late. The house he thought he'd claimed would already be locked with new security codes, and his carefully hidden offshore accounts would be frozen. I pulled out my phone, sending a single text to my lawyer. "It's done." The pieces were in place. Tomorrow would bring the first wave of consequences for the man who thought he could outsmart me at my own game, the game he didn't even know we were playing. Dawn broke over Boston as I reviewed the security footage from our home office. David was already at his morning tennis game, blissfully unaware that his world was about to implode. On my laptop screen, timestamps chronicled his late-night activities. 2:37 a.m., accessing my personal files. 3:15 a.m., photographing documents he thought were original property deeds. 3:42 a.m., making calls to his private banker in the Cayman Islands. My home office setup was a masterpiece of deception. The filing cabinet he'd been raiding contained carefully crafted duplicates, each document designed to lead him down exactly the path I'd planned. The real records were secured in my private office downtown, in a building he didn't even know I owned. Everything's proceeding as scheduled, Elena, my most trusted attorney, confirmed via our encrypted messaging system. The bank alerts have been triggered, and his accounts are under review. The offshore accounts you flagged have been frozen pending investigation. I smiled, remembering David's smug expression when he'd suggested I use his financial advisor. "Your little real estate hobby needs professional management," he'd said, as if my decade of successful property development was a cute pastime. That same advisor was now providing evidence of David's attempts to illegally transfer my assets. The security system chimed, alerting me to movement at the front door. Right on schedule, the locksmith had arrived to change every code and lock in the house. I watched through the cameras as my head of security, Marcus, supervised the work. Marcus had been with me since before I met David, one of the few people who knew my true net worth. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Great game. This morning? Lunch at the club? We should celebrate yesterday's signing." I crafted my response carefully. "Sorry, honey. Already on my way to Rebecca's. Kiss, kiss." Let him enjoy his last few hours of smug satisfaction. Elena's next message made me lean forward. David's lawyer just received the documentation package. Initial reaction suggests he's already considering withdrawing from the case. Perfect. The evidence we'd compiled was damning. Forged signatures, attempted property theft, tax evasion that conveniently started right after our marriage. David's lawyer would have no choice but to recuse himself or risk being implicated in his client's fraud. The morning sun filled my office as I prepared for the next phase. I opened my laptop to monitor the cascade of events we'd set in motion. First, David's credit cards would be declined at the tennis club. A small humiliation, but only the beginning. By the time he reached his office, his executive parking space would be reassigned. After all, the property management company was one of my holdings. Marcus appeared in my doorway, his expression professional but satisfied. "All locks changed, Mrs. Reynolds. New biometric security system is online. We've also secured all safes and changed the garage door frequencies." I nodded, pulling up the camera feeds from David's office building. His secretary, carefully chosen and placed by my team months ago, was already implementing her part of the plan. His calendar was being cleared, appointments canceled, and crucial files accidentally deleted from his computer. "His banker is trying to reach him," Elena messaged. "The offshore account irregularities have triggered automatic fraud protocols." I checked the time, 10:47 a.m. David would be finishing his post-tennis massage, probably planning how to celebrate his perceived victory over me. He had no idea that in exactly 13 minutes his world would begin to crumble. My phone buzzed again, a message from Rebecca, my sister. "Everything's ready here. Operation Homeless Hubby is go." I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I'd spent 3 years watching David try to dismantle my life's work, all while believing I was oblivious. He'd underestimated me, just like every other man who'd assumed my success must have been luck or someone else's doing. The clock struck 11 a.m. Somewhere across Boston, David's credit card was being declined as he tried to pay for his massage. It was a small thing, just the first domino in an elaborate line of consequences I'd carefully arranged. The game was no longer silent. It was time to watch him fall. At precisely 11:23 a.m., David's first panicked call came through. I watched my phone vibrate against my desk, his smiling contact photo a reminder of happier times. I declined the call, knowing each unanswered ring would heighten his growing anxiety. His credit cards are all suspended, Elena reported via our secure channel. The bank's fraud department has flagged suspicious transactions dating back 6 months. Transactions we had meticulously documented and reported through various anonymous channels. My security feed showed David storming into his office building, his tennis whites replaced by a hastily donned suit. His usual confident stride was now a harried rush as he jabbed repeatedly at the executive elevator button, the same elevator that would no longer recognize his access card. "Ma'am," his secretary's voice came through my encrypted line. "Mr. Reynolds is demanding access to the conference room files. Should I proceed as planned?" "Follow protocol, Claire," I instructed. "Full documentation of every request." Through the security feed, I watched David's face redden as Claire calmly explained that his access had been temporarily suspended pending a security review. The conference room behind her contained evidence of his attempts to transfer ownership of 3 of my properties. Evidence that would now be accidentally discovered during the review. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his private banker. "Mrs. Reynolds, urgent matter regarding your joint accounts. Please call immediately." I smiled, knowing David must have tried to access our supposedly joint accounts I'd never actually merged with his. Elena's next message made me lean forward. "His lawyer just called. He's withdrawing from the case, citing irreconcilable ethical concerns. David's been informed via courier." I pulled up the camera feed from our house, my house. The courier was just leaving, having delivered the lawyer's withdrawal notice along with several other carefully timed documents. The entire process had been choreographed like a symphony, each movement building to the next. "Rebecca reports he's tried calling her 3 times, Marcus noted from the doorway. "She's maintaining radio silence as planned." I nodded, checking the time. In exactly 47 minutes, David would receive another blow, notification that his executive position was under review. The board of directors, including several members who sat on my own company's boards, had received anonymous evidence of his financial misconduct this morning. My phone lit up with a message from our neighbor, Charlotte. "David just peeled into the driveway. He looks furious. Security in place?" "Tell her to maintain distance," I instructed Marcus. "Full surveillance active." Through our home security cameras, I watched David discover his keys no longer worked. His increasing frustration was evident as he punched in the garage code repeatedly. Each attempt met with denial. The new biometric locks remained steadfastly immune to his efforts. "His offshore accounts are completely frozen," Elena reported. "The bank's compliance department is launching a full investigation. They're cooperating fully with our documentation." I pulled up the file containing David's most recent attempt to transfer my properties into his name. Each document was a masterpiece of deception, appearing legitimate while containing subtle legal flaws that would invalidate them under scrutiny. Flaws his now former lawyer had failed to notice. "Should we proceed with Phase 4? Marcus asked, his tablet displaying the next set of carefully planned revelations. I checked the time. 11:52 a.m. David had now been locked out of his office, his home, and his accounts. His lawyer had abandoned him, his banking privileges were suspended, and his carefully hidden attempts to steal my properties were about to be exposed. "Execute Phase 4, I confirmed, watching David's increasingly desperate attempts to enter our house. It's time he learned exactly who he tried to deceive. The next wave of revelations would strip away the last of his illusions. By sunset, David would understand that every attempt to undermine me had only strengthened my position. The house he thought he'd claimed would become the symbol of his downfall. Phase 4 began with a simple email, one that would shatter David's carefully constructed facade. His entire office received a memo about organizational restructuring, with his position notably listed under pending review. I watched, through the security feeds as he frantically tried to call board members, only to be met with polite but firm rejections. "The board meeting has been moved up," Elena reported. "They're convening at 2 p.m. instead of next week. All evidence of his financial misconduct has been distributed to the members. I pulled up the real estate records I'd been gathering since our marriage. Each property he thought he'd cleverly put in his name was actually held by one of my shell companies. The downtown office building he bragged about acquiring was still safely under my control, along with every other asset he thought he'd secured." "His executive assistant just handed in a USB drive," Claire messaged. "It contains all his private correspondence regarding the property transfers. Very incriminating stuff." The security feed showed David becoming increasingly agitated, pacing, his office like a caged animal. His perfect hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, his designer suit wrinkled from his frantic movements. This was a side of him his colleagues had never seen, the mask of sophisticated charm cracking under pressure. "The bank's forensic team wants to meet," Elena updated. "They've found irregularities in all the accounts he opened in the past year. Each one leads back to attempted unauthorized transfers from your holdings." My phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. "David just tried to break in through the back door. Security handled it discreetly, but he's becoming erratic. Police have been notified as a precaution." I watched through the cameras as David argued with the security team, his gestures becoming more animated. The same security team that had protected my properties for years, long before he entered the picture. They knew exactly who signed their checks, and it wasn't him. "His mother is trying to reach you," Marcus reported. "Apparently he called her asking for an emergency loan. She's concerned about his mental state." I thought about Margaret, my mother-in-law, who had always treated me with subtle condescension, assuming her son had rescued me from a mundane life. How shocked she would be to learn that her son's luxurious lifestyle had been funded by the very woman he tried to deceive. "The forensic accountants have completed their initial review," Elena's message appeared. "They've documented 17 separate attempts to transfer your properties in the last month alone, each one more desperate than the last." Through the office cameras, I watched as David received the board's email summoning him to the emergency meeting. His face drained of color as he read the attached documentation, evidence of every manipulative move he'd made, every attempt to seize control of my assets, every lie he'd told to cover his tracks. "The police just arrived at your house," Marcus announced. "David's becoming confrontational with security. Should we proceed with the restraining order?" I nodded, pulling up the extensive file we'd compiled. Witness statements, security footage, documented threats, everything needed to ensure he couldn't get near the house or any of my properties again. "His credit score has dropped 200 points, Elena added. "Every financial institution he's contacted today has flagged his accounts for review. No one will touch him now." I checked the time, 1:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, David would face the board of directors, armed only with his charm and excuses. But charm wouldn't explain away the evidence we'd compiled, and excuses wouldn't erase the paper trail of his attempts to steal my empire. "Time to deliver the final documents?" Marcus asked, holding a thick envelope. Inside were divorce papers, restraining orders, and evidence of every betrayal he'd attempted. But more importantly, they contained proof that the house he'd tried to claim, the house he thought he'd secured yesterday, had never been his to take. "Deliver them to the boardroom," I instructed. "Let him understand exactly what he's lost and who he lost it to." The game was entering its final phase, and David was about to learn the true cost of underestimating me. The boardroom camera feed showed David's arrival at exactly 2 p.m. His usual confident swagger had devolved into a nervous stride as he entered the room filled with stern-faced executives, the same executives who had laughed at his jokes at charity, galas, never knowing they were entertaining a fraud. "All members are present," Elena messaged. "The forensic accountant is ready with his presentation. Your documentation has been distributed to each board member." I watched as David took his seat, still trying to maintain his facade of control. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed the thick folders placed before each board member, folders containing evidence of every manipulative move he'd made since our marriage. "Mrs. Reynolds," Claire's message popped up. His personal assistant just turned over additional files. Apparently, he'd been keeping a second set of books. Very detailed records of his attempts to transfer your properties. The board chairman, Richard Montgomery, began the meeting with a gravity that made David's smile falter. "Mr. Reynolds, we've called this emergency session to address some disturbing discoveries regarding your financial activities." Through my secure feed, I could see David's right hand trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. The same hand that had signed countless fraudulent documents, thinking he was building his own empire on the foundation of mine, the Prius. "Police have finished their report," Marcus updated. "They're adding the attempted break-in to the restraining order documentation. His increasingly erratic behavior is working in our favor." I pulled up the real-time feed from our house, my house, where the police were photographing the damage from David's attempted forced entry. Each scratch on the door, each broken window, added another layer to our case against him. "His mother is at the house," Charlotte messaged. "She's demanding to collect his belongings. Security is handling it diplomatically, but she's becoming hysterical." On my screen, the board meeting continued its devastating course. The forensic accountant was methodically presenting evidence of David's systematic attempts to seize control of my properties. Each slide revealed another layer of his deception, another failed attempt to steal what I'd built. "His offshore accounts have been completely frozen," Elena reported. "The banking authorities are cooperating fully with the investigation. They've traced attempts to transfer funds from your business accounts to his private holdings." I watched David's face as the evidence mounted. His complexion had turned ashen as he realized the depth of documentation against him. Every email, every phone call, every secret meeting with shady financial advisors, all meticulously recorded and presented to the board. "The Real Estate Commission has been notified," Marcus added. "They're launching their own investigation into his attempts to fraudulently transfer property titles. His license will likely be suspended by end of day." Through the camera feed, I saw the exact moment David's composure cracked. It happened when Richard Montgomery held up a particular document, the false property transfer David thought he'd successfully hidden. His hand knocked over the water glass, sending water cascading across the polished boardroom table. "The divorce papers have been delivered to the boardroom," Elena confirmed, "along with the restraining order and evidence of financial misconduct." Perfect timing. I checked my watch, 2:47 p.m. In precisely 13 minutes, David would receive the final blow, proof that yesterday's refinancing agreement had been a carefully orchestrated trap designed to document his attempt at property theft. "His executive privileges have been revoked," Claire messaged. "It is already removing his access to all company systems. His email is being archived for the investigation." The security feed showed David's growing desperation as the board members reviewed the evidence. His attempts to explain were met with stony silence. The charm that had served him so well in the past fell flat against the weight of documented proof. "Everything's ready for the final phase," Marcus confirmed. "On your command, we execute the last part of the plan." I nodded, watching David's world crumble in real time. The house he'd tried to steal would become the symbol of his ultimate failure and my most satisfying victory. The final phase began with a simple red folder delivered to the boardroom by Claire with perfect timing. Through the security feed, I watched as Richard Montgomery opened it, his eyebrows rising slightly at its contents. David, still attempting to explain away his actions, fell silent as copies were distributed to each board member. "His private server has been accessed," Elena reported. "The backup files contain everything: emails arranging illegal property transfers, communications with questionable offshore entities, detailed plans to seize control of your assets, The boardroom camera showed David's face draining of color as he realized what was in the red folder. Not just divorce papers and restraining orders, but notarized proof that every property he thought he controlled was legally mine. Including the house he'd tried to claim just yesterday. "Margaret is becoming problematic," Marcus messaged. "She's threatening to call the media, claiming harassment. Should we release the recordings of her discussing David's plans to take control of his wife's little real estate hobby?" I smiled, remembering the dinner parties where Margaret had patronizingly praised my cute little investment properties, never realizing she was sitting in one of them. The penthouse she'd so admired was part of my first commercial development, purchased years before I met her son. "The bank's fraud department has completed their initial review," Elena updated. "They're moving to permanently close all his accounts. The evidence of attempted unauthorized transfers is overwhelming." Through the camera feed, I watched David frantically flipping through the documents, his manicured hands shaking. Each page revealed another layer of protection I'd built around my empire, another failsafe he'd failed to discover. "Charlotte reports unusual activity," Marcus alerted. "David's personal trainer just tried to remove items from the house gym. Security intercepted him. Apparently David promised him equipment as payment for unpaid sessions." I pulled up the house security feeds. The garage that had once housed David's precious BMW was now empty. The car had been repossessed an hour ago, its lease revealed to be paid by one of my companies. His belongings were being systematically cataloged and removed, each item photographed, for legal documentation. "The board is ready to vote," Elena messaged. "The evidence is insurmountable. His termination is guaranteed." I watched as Richard Montgomery called for the vote. One by one, board members who had once laughed at David's jokes and played golf at his club raised their hands to end his career. His carefully cultivated image of successful executive was crumbling before their eyes. "His social club membership has been revoked," Claire reported. "Apparently, he tried to charge a significant bar tab to his suspended account. The manager is pressing charges for attempted fraud." The security feed showed David's growing desperation as the reality of his situation became clear. His position, his reputation, his social standing, everything he'd built on the foundation of my success was dissolving. "The police are requesting an additional statement," Marcus noted. "They've reviewed the security footage from his break-in attempt. They're recommending criminal charges." Through my monitors, I watched as David received the final blow. The board's unanimous vote for immediate termination. His access cards were collected, his company phone disconnected, his carefully crafted world of privilege and power stripped away in minutes. "Rebecca has secured all documentation," Elena confirmed. "Every attempt he made to transfer properties, every forged signature, every secret meeting with shady lawyers, all preserved and notarized." I checked the time, 3:27 p.m. In exactly 3 minutes, David would be escorted from the building by security. His corner office would be sealed, his files confiscated, his pretense of success finally exposed. "Shall we proceed with the media statement?" Marcus asked, holding the prepared press release detailing corporate embezzlement and attempted property theft. I nodded, watching David's final moments in the boardroom. The house he'd tried to steal would now become a symbol of his downfall. And my carefully orchestrated revenge was only beginning. The press release hit the business wires at exactly 3:30 p.m. Within minutes, David's phone began lighting up with notifications as the story spread through Boston's corporate circles. Each message alert illuminated his increasingly panicked expression as he was escorted from the building. "His social media accounts are exploding," Elena reported. "The story's being picked up by major business publications. His connections are already distancing themselves." Through the security feeds, I watched him standing on the sidewalk outside his former office building, the same building I'd purchased through a shell company 3 years ago. His Italian leather briefcase, a birthday gift he'd bought with my money, hung limply at his side. "Margaret's lawyers have received the documentation," Marcus updated. "They're advising her to cease all public statements. The recordings of her discussing David's plans have apparently changed her perspective. I pulled up the real-time news alerts. The story was spreading faster than anticipated. Corporate fraud, attempted property theft, domestic deception. David's carefully crafted reputation was unraveling thread by thread in the digital age. "The country club board is meeting," Claire messaged. "They're voting to revoke his membership permanently. Apparently, his behavior at the club this morning was the final straw." The security cameras showed David attempting to hail a cab, but his credit cards were declined for the fare. The same cards he'd used to build his illusion of success, never realizing they were backed by my accounts. "The restraining order has been served," Elena confirmed. "Police are en route to ensure he doesn't return to the house. His mother has finally left the premises, though she's threatening legal action." I watched through multiple camera feeds as David's world continued to collapse. His phone, now blowing up with messages from former friends and colleagues, would soon be disconnected. The corporate line had already been deactivated. His personal assistant provided more documentation, Claire reported. Love letters to his secretary in the Cayman Islands office, the same office where he tried to hide the fraudulent property transfers. That was an unexpected bonus. Evidence of infidelity would only strengthen our case. I added it to the growing file of David's indiscretions, each one carefully documented and dated. "The forensic accountants found something interesting," Elena messaged. "He's been maintaining a secret apartment downtown, paid for with diverted funds from what he thought were his corporate accounts." I smiled, pulling up the property records. The apartment building was another of my holdings, managed through a different shell company. He'd been literally paying me rent while trying to steal my properties. "The media is requesting comments," Marcus noted. "Several reporters are asking about the connection between his terminated employment and the domestic situation. Should we release the prepared statement?" Through the cameras, I watched David finally secure a ride. Not in his usual luxury car service, but in a basic rideshare. His destination, his mother's house in the suburbs, the only place left for him to go. "His lawyers are scrambling," Elena updated. 3 different firms have already declined to represent him. The evidence package we compiled is too comprehensive for them to risk their reputations. I checked the security feeds from my house. The police had finished documenting the break-in attempt, adding more weight to our case. David's belongings were being systematically removed, each item photographed and logged. "Charlotte reports his gym trainer is spreading the word," Marcus added. "Apparently, David owes money to half the service providers in the neighborhood. His house of cards is collapsing faster than expected." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through my office windows as I monitored David's descent into chaos. His phone was now ringing constantly. Creditors, former friends, journalists sensing a story, each call adding to the pressure of his crumbling facade. "The final eviction notice is ready," Elena confirmed. "Shall we proceed with changing the property records to reveal the true ownership?" I nodded, watching David's car disappear into Boston. Traffic. The house he'd tried to steal would now become the most public symbol of his humiliation, and my reclamation of power. Evening descended on Boston as the full impact of David's downfall reverberated through our social circles. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from mutual friends, each one suddenly remembering instances of David's suspicious behavior they'd previously overlooked. "His mother's house is surrounded by reporters," Elena reported. "The story has gone viral in local business circles. Several other companies are launching internal audits, concerned about similar fraud schemes." Through our surveillance network, I watched David pacing in Margaret's living room, his designer suit now wrinkled, his perfectly styled hair disheveled. The same surveillance system he'd bragged about installing in our house, never realizing it was part of my corporate security network. "The country club incident report has been filed," Marcus updated. 4 witnesses have provided statements about his aggressive behavior this morning. The police are considering additional charges. I pulled up the real-time news coverage on my monitors. Local business reporters were piecing together the story. Rising executive exposed for fraud. Attempted property theft and systematic deception. His image as a successful businessman was being deconstructed in real time. His secretary in the Cayman's office is cooperating, Claire messaged. She's provided emails detailing his plans to transfer properties once the divorce was finalized. He apparently promised her a position in his new company. The security feeds showed a steady stream of delivery trucks arriving at my house. Locksmiths finishing their work, security teams updating systems, movers cataloging David's belongings. Each action methodically documented for legal purposes. The offshore accounts are completely frozen, Elena confirmed. Banking authorities have traced attempts to wire funds from your corporate accounts. The evidence of financial fraud is overwhelming. I watched through the cameras as David's personal items were carefully boxed and labeled. His precious wine collection, bought with my money. His designer wardrobe, charged to accounts I controlled. His rare book collection, purchased from profits of my properties. Social media is exploding, Marcus noted. The hashtag #OwlBostonFraud is trending locally. Several of his former business associates are publicly distancing themselves. On my screen, I could see David attempting to access his frozen accounts through his phone, growing increasingly frustrated with each declined transaction. His world of financial privilege was evaporating with each failed attempt. Rebecca has secured all the necessary documentation, Elena reported. The property records will be updated tomorrow morning, showing your continuous ownership. His attempt to claim, the house will be publicly exposed. I pulled up the surveillance feed from Margaret Street. More news vans were arriving, attracted by the story of corporate fraud and domestic deception. David's fall from grace was becoming the local scandal of the year. His private club memberships are being revoked, Claire updated. The yacht club, the cigar lounge, the executive dining club, all terminating his access. His social standing is crumbling. Through the security system, I watched as the last of David's possessions were removed from my house. The space already felt lighter, cleaner, free from his presence and pretense. The police want to schedule another interview, Marcus added. They're building a criminal case based on the financial evidence and his aggressive behavior today. Evening. Shadows lengthened across my office as I monitored the continuing fallout. David's phone had finally stopped ringing. His friends and colleagues had said all they needed to say, none of it supportive. The media statement is gaining traction, Elena confirmed. Business journals are requesting interviews about corporate fraud prevention. Your reputation as a savvy businesswoman is actually being enhanced by this. I checked the final security feeds from the house. The new biometric locks were active, the security codes changed, the surveillance system upgraded. The fortress he'd tried to claim was now permanently beyond his reach. Shall we proceed with the final phase? Marcus asked, holding the last set of documents, the ones that would completely sever every connection between David and my properties. I nodded, watching the sun set over Boston. The house he'd tried to steal would stand as a monument to his hubris, and my carefully executed revenge. As night settled over Boston, the final pieces of my plan clicked into place. The evening news was leading with David's story, complete with helicopter footage of him being turned away from our gated community when he attempted to return home. The bank has completed their audit, Elena reported. They found evidence of systematic attempts to redirect funds from your business accounts. The criminal investigation is expanding. Through the security feeds, I watched David's increasingly desperate attempts to contact his former colleagues. Each call went unanswered, each message unread. The same people who had laughed at his jokes yesterday were now blocking his number. His emergency hearing request was denied, Marcus updated. The judge reviewed our evidence package and denied his motion to contest the property ownership. The restraining order stands. I pulled up the live feed from Margaret's house. David sat in her formal living room, surrounded by shopping bags containing the few items he'd managed to purchase before his cards were declined. His mother paced nearby, her earlier bravado replaced by quiet worry. The Cayman Islands office has more, Claire messaged. His secretary provided emails showing he planned to transfer all property titles once the divorce was finalized. He promised her a position as his personal estate manager. The security system at my house reported another attempted access, this time from David's personal trainer, claiming he needed to retrieve client files. The same trainer who had been secretly reporting David's conversations to my team for months. His former executive assistant came forward, Elena noted. She's provided recordings of David discussing plans to liquidate your properties once he gained control. Apparently, he's been planning this for over a year. On my monitors, I watched as news crews set up for their evening broadcasts outside. Margaret's house. Local reporters were piecing together the story of David's deception, each revelation adding another layer to his public humiliation. Social media has the full story, Marcus reported. His attempts to seize the house are being widely shared. Several real estate forums are discussing the legal implications of his fraud attempt. The house security cameras showed the final changes being implemented. New artwork replacing his pretentious collections, security systems being upgraded, every trace of his presence being systematically erased. The forensic accountants found his contingency plans, Elena updated. Hidden accounts, fake identities, even a planned escape route. He never expected to be caught. I reviewed the surveillance footage from earlier that day. David's failed attempt to break in, his confrontation with security, his mother's hysterical demands. Each incident now preserved as evidence of his unraveling. The country club has made a statement, Claire added. They're publicly distancing themselves from him. His unpaid bills and this morning's behavior have become a liability for them. Through the cameras, I watched as the last moving truck pulled away from my house. David's precious possessions, all bought with my money, were being transported to a secure storage facility, each item documented for the ongoing fraud investigation. Rebecca reports multiple media requests, Marcus noted. Business journals want your perspective on protecting assets from domestic fraud. Your story is resonating with female executives. The evening grew darker as I monitored the continuing fallout. David's phone had finally died, his service disconnected due to unpaid bills, his electronic lifeline to his former world of privilege cut off. The police have updated their report, Elena confirmed. They're adding attempted breaking and entering to the charges. His increasingly erratic behavior is being viewed as a pattern of escalation. I checked the final security implementation at the house. Every lock changed, every code updated, every system secured against any future attempts at access. The fortress he'd tried to claim was now permanently sealed against him. His mother's lawyers want to negotiate, Marcus reported. They've reviewed the evidence and are advising her to distance herself from his legal troubles. Night had fully descended on Boston, but David's nightmare was just beginning. The house he'd tried to steal would become his most public failure, and my most satisfying triumph. Midnight approached as the final phase of my plan unfolded. Boston's business community was still buzzing with the scandal, their phones lighting up with each new revelation about David's attempted property theft and financial fraud. His former business partner came forward, Elena reported. Apparently, David tried to involve him in the property scheme 6 months ago. He's provided all their correspondence to the investigators. The security feeds showed an eerie calm at Margaret's house now. The news vans had finally departed, leaving behind a neighborhood forever changed by the day's revelations. Through the windows, I could see David slumped in an armchair, his phone lying dead beside him. The DA's office is reviewing the case, Marcus updated. They're particularly interested in the pattern of financial manipulation and attempted property theft. They're considering pressing criminal charges. I pulled up the footage from earlier that evening, David's third attempt to enter our gated community, this time claiming he'd forgotten important medications inside the house. The same house he'd tried to steal through fraudulent documentation, the Cayman Islands investigation is expanding, Claire messaged. They've uncovered a network of shell companies he created, all designed to hide his attempts to seize control of your properties. Through our surveillance system, I watched as the last security team completed their rounds at my house. The property that had witnessed so much deception was now transformed into an impenetrable fortress, every entry point secured against future intrusions. His private club memberships are being systematically revoked, Elena noted. The exclusive social circles he cultivated are closing ranks against him. His reputation in Boston society is effectively destroyed. The monitors showed the final changes to my home's security systems being implemented: biometric locks, advanced surveillance, and state-of-the-art monitoring, all designed to ensure David could never again threaten what was mine. Rebecca has gathered more evidence, Marcus reported. Former employees from his previous companies are coming forward with stories of similar schemes. This appears to be a long-standing pattern of behavior. I reviewed the day's security footage, the progression of David's desperation captured in high definition. From his morning confidence to his evening breakdown, each moment preserved for the ongoing investigation. The media coverage is intensifying, Claire updated. Business. Journals are calling this a cautionary tale about domestic financial abuse. Your story is becoming a warning to others. On my screens, I could see David attempting to use his laptop in Margaret's living room, likely discovering that his access to all professional networks had been revoked. His digital footprint was being systematically erased. The forensic accountants found something interesting, Elena messaged. Hidden files showing he planned to convert all your properties into a new development company, one under his sole control. The house cameras captured the stillness of the empty rooms, now cleared of David's presence. His wine cellar stood empty, his home office stripped bare, his closets vacated, each space reclaimed and secured. Social media is still active, Marcus noted. The story has spread beyond Boston. National business networks are picking up the narrative of corporate fraud and attempted property theft. Through the night vision cameras, I watched the security teams conducting their final checks. Each lock tested, each camera aligned, each sensor calibrated to protect against any future attempts at invasion. His divorce attorney withdrew representation, Elena confirmed. After reviewing our evidence package, they've advised him to seek different counsel. No reputable firm will touch his case. The late-night silence was broken only by the soft hum of security systems and surveillance equipment. The house that David had tried to claim stood as a testament to failed ambition and thwarted deception. The police want to schedule another interview, Marcus added. They're building a comprehensive case combining financial fraud, attempted property theft, and recent threatening behavior. Midnight struck as I reviewed the final security protocols. The house that had become the center of David's scheme would now stand as a monument to his greatest failure and my most complete victory. As the new day dawned, the full extent of David's downfall became apparent. The morning news shows were leading with updated coverage of his scandal, complete with expert analysis of the sophisticated financial fraud he'd attempted. His offshore accounts have been completely traced, Elena reported. Banking authorities have mapped every attempt to transfer funds from your companies. The evidence trail is remarkably clear. The security feeds showed early morning activity at Margaret's house, David's luxury car being repossessed from her driveway, the same car he'd bragged about negotiating a deal for, never realizing it was leased through one of my shell companies, the Thai. Federal investigators want to meet, Marcus updated. They're particularly interested in the international aspects of his fraud attempts. The cross-border financial manipulation has caught their attention. I pulled up the morning's surveillance, footage from my house. The property gleamed in the early light, every trace of David's presence now removed. The security teams had worked through the night, ensuring every system was perfectly calibrated. His former executive club is making a statement, Claire messaged. They're publicly revoking his membership and releasing details about his unpaid dues. Several other members have come forward with stories of his recent erratic behavior. The cameras caught a determined real estate reporter attempting to photograph the house through the gates. The same gates David had tried to storm through yesterday, not realizing every security guard knew exactly who owned the property. More witnesses have come forward, Elena noted. Former business associates describing his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain his facade of success. Each account adds to the pattern of deception. Through the monitors, I watched the morning security shift change at my house. Each guard had been briefed on David's previous attempts to gain entry, each one ready to protect what he'd tried to steal. The criminal investigation is accelerating, Marcus reported. Prosecutors are reviewing the evidence of financial fraud, attempted property theft, and recent threatening behavior. They're building a comprehensive case. I reviewed the latest security footage from Margaret's neighborhood. News vans were returning for morning updates, their presence a constant reminder of David's public disgrace. His private banking team has resigned, Claire updated. They've provided investigators with records of his recent unusual transaction. Requests, his attempts to hide assets are now fully documented. The morning sun illuminated my reclaimed spaces. The home office where he'd plotted against me. The wine cellar he'd filled with my money. The garage that had housed his now repossessed luxury cars. Social media continues to amplify the story, Elena messaged. Business influencers are analyzing his downfall, using it as a case study in corporate fraud and domestic financial abuse. On my screens, I could see David emerging from Margaret's house, his designer suit replaced by casual clothes that still bore yesterday's wrinkles. His polished appearance, once so carefully maintained, had crumbled along with his pretense of success. The forensic audit is revealing more, Marcus noted. They've uncovered evidence of smaller fraud attempts dating back years. This appears to be an established pattern of behavior. Through the security system, I monitored the final removal of David's presence from my property, each personal item cataloged, each access point secured, each trace of his deception eliminated. His former social circle is talking, Claire reported. Country club members, business associates, even his personal trainer, all sharing stories of recent concerning behavior. The morning light streamed through my office windows as I reviewed the ongoing security measures. The house that David had tried to claim stood as a symbol of failed manipulation and thwarted greed. His mother's lawyers are requesting a meeting, Elena confirmed. They're hoping to negotiate some form of settlement to protect their family's reputation. The scandal is affecting their social standing. As Boston awakened to another day of revelations, I watched the continuing dismantling of David's carefully constructed world. The house he'd tried to steal would now serve as a permanent reminder of his greatest miscalculation. The morning progressed with a steady stream of new developments. Business networks were running special reports on domestic financial fraud, using David's attempted property theft as their prime example. The SEC has opened a formal investigation, Elena reported. They're particularly interested in how he attempted to manipulate property transfers through corporate accounts. His trading activities are under scrutiny. Through the security feeds, I watched as David made another futile attempt to access his frozen accounts from Margaret's computer. Each declined transaction adding to the mounting evidence of his financial desperation. The district attorney's office called, Marcus updated. They're focusing on the pattern of deceptive behavior. Your documented evidence has given them a clear timeline of his escalating fraud attempts. I pulled up the real-time surveillance of my house. Professional cleaners were removing the last traces of David's presence, his designer cologne from the bathroom, his monogrammed towels, his precious collection of status symbols. His former business mentor reached out, Claire messaged. Apparently, David had approached him about investing in a property development opportunity, using the houses he thought he'd stolen from you as collateral. The security cameras captured a steady stream of curious onlookers driving past the gates, each one drawn by the story of the successful executive exposed as a fraud, trying to glimpse the house at the center of the scandal. The banking investigation has expanded, Elena noted. They've traced his attempts to establish new accounts under false pretenses. Every financial institution in Boston has been notified of his fraudulent activities. Through my monitors, I watched the installation of additional security measures. Each entrance now protected by state-of-the-art systems, every possible point of access secured against future intrusion attempts. His private club memberships continue to fall, Marcus reported. The yacht club board just voted to publicly revoke his status. They're citing his pattern of deceptive behavior and unpaid obligations. The morning light revealed David's increasingly desperate situation. His attempts to contact former colleagues met with silence, his professional networks dissolving, his carefully crafted image crumbling. More employees are coming forward, Claire updated. Staff from his office describing suspicious meetings, unusual document requests, patterns of manipulative behavior. The evidence against him keeps mounting. On my screens, I reviewed footage of David's earlier attempts to access the property. Each failed entry attempt now documented and added to the growing file of his increasingly erratic behavior. The media coverage is evolving, Elena messaged. Business journals are analyzing how he maintained his facade of success while attempting to systematically steal your properties. Your security measures are being praised. The security feeds showed the final transformation of my home. Every room reclaimed, every space secured, every trace of David's presence systematically eliminated from the property he'd tried to steal. His mother's social circle is reacting, Marcus noted. Their usual charity committees are quietly dropping her name from donor lists. The scandal is affecting their entire family's standing. Through the surveillance system, I monitored the ongoing security protocols. Each guard now fully briefed on David's tactics, every camera positioned to capture any future attempts at unauthorized access. The international investigation is proceeding, Claire reported. Authorities in the Cayman Islands have frozen his remaining accounts. His attempts to hide assets overseas have been completely exposed. The morning sun highlighted the empty spaces where David's possessions had once stood, spaces now reclaimed and secured against any future attempts at invasion or theft. His legal options are disappearing, Elena confirmed. Every law firm he's approached has declined to represent him after reviewing our evidence. His position is becoming increasingly untenable. As the morning advanced, I watched the continuing dismantling of David's world. The house he'd tried to claim would stand as a testament to his failed ambition and my carefully executed revenge. The afternoon brought a fresh wave of revelations. Business analysts were dissecting David's downfall on national networks, using his attempted property theft as a case study in domestic financial fraud. His former investment advisor came forward, Elena reported. He's provided records of David's increasingly desperate attempts to secure loans using properties he didn't own as collateral. Each application adds to the fraud charges. The security feeds showed David pacing in Margaret's garden, his phone pressed to his ear as he tried to reach former colleagues. Each call went unanswered, his professional network having dissolved in the wake of his exposure. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is interested, Marcus updated. They're particularly focused on the international aspects of his fraud attempts. The cross-border financial manipulation has caught their attention. I monitored the live feed from my house as specialized security consultants conducted another sweep. Every room was being equipped with additional safeguards, each entrance fortified, against any future intrusion attempts. His executive assistant provided more evidence, Claire messaged. Detailed records of suspicious meetings, unusual document requests, and attempts to access restricted financial information. The pattern of deception is clear. Through the cameras, I watched as a team of forensic accountants arrived at my home, office. They were documenting every aspect of David's attempted financial manipulation, building an airtight case against him. The restraining order has been extended, Elena noted. The judge reviewed the new evidence of his escalating behavior. The protection now covers all your properties, not just the house. On my screens, I could see reporters gathering again outside Margaret's house. Each news cycle brought fresh revelations about David's schemes, each story adding to his public humiliation. His social media has been scrubbed, Marcus reported. Professional networks have removed his profiles after reviewing evidence of fraudulent claims. His digital presence is being systematically erased. The afternoon sun illuminated the empty spaces in my home where David's possessions had once stood. Each void now represented a victory, each cleared area a reclamation of what he'd tried to steal. More witnesses have emerged, Claire updated. Former business partners describing his recent erratic behavior, suspicious financial requests, and increasingly desperate attempts to maintain his facade. Through the surveillance system, I monitored the final security upgrades. Every window reinforced, every door secured, every possible entry point protected against future attempts at invasion. The banking investigation has uncovered more, Elena messaged. Hidden accounts, unauthorized transfer attempts, a pattern of financial deception that spans multiple institutions. His financial crimes are fully documented. The cameras captured David's mother leaving her house, her usual confident stride replaced by a hurried walk to avoid the waiting reporters. The family's social standing was crumbling along with David's reputation. His private clubs are making statements, Marcus noted, each one publicly distancing themselves from him, citing his pattern of deceptive behavior and financial misconduct. His social world is collapsing. I reviewed the security footage of David's earlier break-in attempts. Each failed entry now served as evidence of his increasingly desperate behavior, each recorded incident strengthening the case against him. The media narrative is shifting, Claire reported. Business journals are focusing on the sophisticated security measures that protected your assets. Your story is becoming a blueprint for financial self-defense. The afternoon light streamed through newly reinforced windows as I monitored the ongoing security protocols. The house that David had tried to claim was now transformed into an impenetrable fortress. His legal troubles are mounting, Elena confirmed. Prosecutors are preparing multiple charges, combining financial fraud, attempted property theft, and recent threatening behavior. His future is looking increasingly grim. As the day progressed, I watched the continued dismantling of David's carefully constructed world. The house he'd tried to steal would stand as a monument to his failed ambition and my perfectly executed revenge. As sunset painted the Boston skyline in shades of gold, the final phase of David's downfall played out across my security monitors. National news networks were now carrying the story, analyzing how a seemingly successful executive had orchestrated such an elaborate fraud attempt. The federal indictment has been filed, Elena reported. Multiple charges of financial fraud, attempted property theft, and wire fraud. The prosecutors are confident in their case. His attempt to steal your house was the final nail in his coffin. Through the security feeds, I watched David leaving Margaret's house with a single suitcase. His mother's influence had finally reached its limit. Her social circle had made it clear his presence was damaging their family's remaining reputation. Your interview has gone viral, Marcus updated. Business publications are praising your foresight in protecting your assets. Female executives worldwide are using your story as a blueprint for financial security. I monitored the final security implementation at my house. Every trace of David's presence had been erased, every system upgraded, every safeguard reinforced. The property he'd tried to steal had become a fortress of my triumph. His final attempt at legal representation failed, Claire messaged. The last law firm reviewed our evidence package and declined to take his case. He's been officially advised to surrender to authorities. The cameras captured David's luxury car being loaded onto a tow truck. The lease company had tracked it to Margaret's house, another symbol of his false success repossessed, another piece of his facade stripped away. The real estate commission made their decision, Elena noted. His license has been permanently revoked. The evidence of attempted property fraud was overwhelming. He'll never work in real estate again. Through my monitors, I watched as news crews documented David's departure from his mother's house. His designer suitcase, the last remnant of his privileged life, looked oddly out of place next to his borrowed economy rental car. "The banking investigation is complete," Marcus reported. "Every financial institution in Boston has been notified of his fraud attempt. His name has been added to industry warning lists. No bank will touch him." The evening light cast long shadows through my reclaimed spaces. Each room now secured, each entrance protected, each area purified of his presence and deception. "The FBI wants to use this case," Claire updated. "They're developing new protocols for detecting domestic financial fraud based on his schemes. Your documentation will help protect others." On my screens, I reviewed footage of David's last desperate attempts to access the house. Each failed. Entry now served as evidence in multiple investigations, each recorded incident strengthening the cases against him. "The international warrants are ready," Elena messaged. "If he attempts to flee the country, he'll be detained. Every escape route has been closed, every haven blocked. He's completely trapped." The sunset gleamed off newly installed security cameras as I monitored the final systems check. The house that David had tried to claim stood as a testament to female empowerment and financial independence. "His mother's lawyers have surrendered," Marcus noted. "They've advised her to cooperate fully with investigators. The family's attempt to protect him has completely collapsed." Through the security feeds, I watched David's rental car disappear into Boston traffic. His world had shrunk from luxury penthouses and exclusive clubs to whatever cheap motel would accept cash payment. "The media requests continue," Claire reported. "Business schools want to use your story in their ethics courses. Your experience is becoming a cautionary tale about greed and consequence." The evening sky darkened as I reviewed the final security protocols. The house that had witnessed his greatest deception would now stand as a symbol of his complete defeat. But why? "Authorities are ready," Elena confirmed. "Every aspect of his fraud has been documented, every escape route blocked, every asset frozen. His surrender is inevitable." As night fell over Boston, I watched the last traces of David's presence fade from my world. The house he'd tried to steal had become the instrument of his destruction and my ultimate victory.